Alright guys, Dan the Platinum Man here. I've been mulling this game over in my head since I platinumed it in January. Life is Strange is one of those games I had heard about, seen referenced a few times, but hadn't gotten around to playing. And seeing that it was leaving PS Plus gave me the kick I needed to try it. At first, I wasn't feeling it. Complete game spoilers ahead, and notes that the footage is from the PS3 version rather than the PS4 version. The gameplay seemed simple and straightforward, and it wasn't grabbing me much. Until the murder happened. Seeing the strange girl who I was guessing was the old best friend getting shot in the bathroom, and the first time jump back to just before the bathroom manslaughter happened, coming to terms with the limits of the time travel, seeing how it contradicts itself in this first chapter, whereas for the rest of the game, Max, the main character, and her power works by rewinding time, but keeping Max in the same place she currently is. Yet, for some reason, after her first use, she is back in the classroom she starts in, as opposed to in the bathroom. Anywho, forget about that. Time for the meat of the game. So you start going through the game, solving some light puzzles, and choosing to be nice, a bit of a bitch, or just antisocial and ignoring most of the side content and characters. Getting trophies is pretty simple too, just taking photos throughout the episodes and reaching the end of the episode. Oh yeah, this released during the time where episodic games were all the rage, where they would charge you per episode and take way longer to release, rather than just releasing the full game all at once. We get introduced properly to Chloe, the second worst thing about this game. Towards the end, I'll be ranting about the worst. It's like the writers took everything that is inherently unlikable about teenage girls and bad characters in general, put it all together, dyed its hair blue, and said, yup, this is our secondary protagonist, whom most of the game revolves around. Chloe is simply an irredeemable bitch of a character. To this day, I struggle to think of a single redeeming quality about her. With a friend like her, you have no need for enemies or a nemesis. What's worse is that the prequel, Before the Storm, has you play as Chloe instead. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're still in episode 1. So, after preventing the murder, choosing whether or not to tell the principal about the potential shooting you avoided, and getting better acquainted with some of the side cast, namely Nathan, the shooter, Victoria, the rival, Warren, the potential love interest, Mr. Jefferson, the photography teacher, Kate, a girl who was recently drugged, and David, the school security guard. There are other characters, but none of them are as important as these. I would know. I ignored most of them. Then we become obligated to spend the remaining half of the episode with Chloe, the bitch that she is. We see how much of a dead end life Chloe has lived, and how much of a useless deadbeat she is. David becomes the second best character in the game, however, as he smacks Chloe, who deserves it. We then get to a literal cliffhanger that takes place on a cliff that shows that the entire town is going to be wiped out by a massive cyclone in a few days. Good thing I was playing the remastered version that already has all the episodes. Episode 2 starts with an unskippable, fully clothed shower scene. We spend a stupid amount of time in episode 2 with Chloe, testing the powers of the rewind ability through mostly mundane tasks, starting at the local diner, then proceeding to the local junkyard, potentially having Chloe shoot herself with the gun that she stole from David, and getting into stupid trouble with Chloe's drug dealer, Frank. Naturally, the drug dealer steals the stolen gun. Shortly afterwards, Chloe nearly dies again due to playing on the train tracks and getting stuck. Dumb ways to die, anyone? After that awful experience, where unfortunately Chloe is forced to be allowed to live, we return to school. Then the actual heavy shit happens. Max's power stops working to rewind time, and we have to talk Kate down. Kate is worried because she claims to have been drugged by Nathan and was recorded behaving like a slut at a party. These actions were recorded and shared online, and Kate has been shamed and hounded for these actions. As such, she is considering the logical choice, ending it all and making a spectacle of it by swan diving onto cement at the school in front of everyone. Depending on how you made Max deal with some of the miscellaneous stuff in episode 1 and a bit of the stuff at the beginning of this episode, it can be easier or harder to talk Kate out of jumping. I'll admit, I got emotionally invested in this self deletion, and I was more than perturbed that I failed to talk Kate down this first time. So, I went outside the game to rewind time and try again. And afterwards, the faculty tries to partially blame Max for getting to the roof in time to actually do something. Of course, this shows just how useless David is at doing his job. The principal finally does something and suspends Nathan due to the bad reputation Nathan is causing for the school. Oh, and there's another reminder that the storm is still coming. And nothing like a spontaneous solar eclipse to brighten things up. Episode 3. So now comes the actual time to start investigating things. We sneak out of the dorm room past the principal, see Victoria trying to flirt with Mr. Jefferson, and then the stealth operation begins. Following this, Max works with Chloe to sneak into the school, to start finally getting some info on Nathan, why he would have a gun, why Chloe is interested, and finally trying to get some answers on Rachel. Rachel is a character who never shows up in the game. Rachel is said to be missing from the start of the game. Chloe was involved romantically with Rachel, which is why Chloe is so desperate to find Rachel. We get some hard dirt on enough people and make sure to steal money from the principal's desk. Not desperate enough to skip sneaking into the school pool with Max after raiding the principal's office, a scene that has zero fan service or anything of value. Once we wake up in Chloe's house, we need to steal some more information from David's personal effects. Hack the laptop. Also, we take David's side during the confrontation because he had the balls to smack Chloe. Then, we need to go bother Frank the drug dealer to see what info he has on Rachel, stealing his keys from him at the diner, and making sure to throw the bone into the parking lot so that the dog doesn't get hurt. After getting some pieces of the puzzle, and realizing Chloe was kind of right about Rachel looking for any way out of town, but also wrong as Rachel seemed to be really into Frank romantically. After putting some of the clues together, Chloe has yet another meltdown. Shortly after, Chloe and Max begin to reminisce about old times, and then Max does the unbelievable. By looking at an old photograph, Max is able to travel back in time to the moment and area of the photo, and is able to edit what happens. So, Max travels back in time to the day that Chloe's dad died, and manages to prevent his death. The past then gets overwritten, and we see how life turned out for most people. Max seems to be better adjusted at school, but Rachel is still missing. And on her way to visit Chloe, dead whales have washed up onto the beach. Upon arriving at Chloe's house, you see her dad, tired but happy, and he's excited to see Max. Of course, as is easily predicted, Chloe is now the one who was involved in an accident. Now she is completely paralyzed from the neck down. And that's how episode 3 ends. Episode 4 starts off with Max still in the alternate timeline. At first, beyond the same apocalyptic shit going down and Rachel still missing, this timeline is clearly the superior option. Chloe is finally actually a normal person, someone who's likable and relatable. Sure, her quality of life is terrible since she is horrendously crippled, but she's not a bitch. And I actually got attached to her for her whole 30 minutes of screen time. Yeah, as is predicted, easily, the good things weren't going to last. After spending some quality time with non bitch Chloe and seeing the family actually be happy and functional despite the massive debt and problems, we get hit with the reveal. Chloe is going to die slowly and arduously within the coming year. Chloe asks Max to end her right there and then in a way that makes Chloe happy so that she doesn't have to suffer. Naturally, I obliged her, and as expected, we time jump out of there, back to the OG timeline. We stop our meddling in the past, and then destroy the photos so that we can't jump back to that time. We have an emotional scene of Max breaking down the story while breaking down in tears, telling bitch Chloe all about the other timeline. God damn it, now we gotta put up with the bitch again. Why couldn't we have stayed in the happy timeline? Kate didn't try to jump, Chloe wasn't a bitch, Nathan and Victoria didn't have hate boners for Max, and David is a bus driver instead of a wannabe cop. Max probably could have solved Rachel's disappearance on her own. But we must march on. So, we go steal a file from David's stuff. Then we visit Kate at the hospital to see how she's doing. We do some snooping around Nathan's room at the dorms, and then make sure to let Warren beat the crap out of Nathan so that Chloe can steal Nathan's gun. Then we go to interrogate Frank, the drug dealer. We make sure not to hurt Frank or his dog. We spend time putting all the clues together and find out that Nathan visited this really old barn out in the middle of nowhere. Upon going to investigate said barn, we discover that there's an underground bunker where Nathan has been kidnapping women after drugging them to take photos of them and then killing the women. We discover that Rachel has been dead this whole time and quickly rush to the junkyard to find her impromptu grave. We discover the body and get ready to confront Nathan at the Vortex Club party at school. We meet Warren out front and take a photo. This will be important later! Also, there's now a double moon in the sky and birds are falling out of the sky as well. Depending on your prior actions, you can either get a free pass into the VIP section or have to sneak in. You can try to warn Victoria that she's the next target to be drugged and offed. Nathan, however, is a no-show, and then he threatens to hide the evidence of Rachel's corpse. So Max and Chloe bail from the party and rush to Rachel's grave. Upon arrival, we see the corpse hasn't been moved yet. Max gets injected with some drug. Chloe then stands up in a rage and then tries and fails to summon her persona. This is followed by the surprise reveal. That's right, this whole time, the mastermind behind the dark room, the kidnappings and killings, is actually Mr. Jefferson, the photography teacher? Episode 4 ends here, with Jefferson being the best character in this game. Now, we proceed to the final chapter. Max wakes up in restraints in the torture room with the main antagonist. Jefferson reveals that Nathan was a pawn and a liability and has been expunged. Max, through some partial manipulations, is able to get a photograph that allows her to jump into that time to prevent this future. The particular photograph used takes us back to day 1, in class, before Chloe gets deservedly shot. Following her first instinct, Max snitches to David about the dangers of Nathan and Jefferson and actually submits a photo in the contest. We are then treated to a montage seeing Jefferson and Nathan arrested, Chloe unfortunately surviving, and Max is now being chaperoned by the principal to show off the photograph and get her award in California. Things seem to be going great until that bitch Chloe starts flipping out on a phone call. The storm is here and everything is going to shit! So, Max decides to make a sacrifice and dives into her winning photograph to destroy it and attempt to restart the timeline. This, naturally, doesn't work, as Max regains consciousness in the dark room and the aftermath of Jefferson destroying all of Max's photographs. The situation seems bleak and hopeless. Until, and I can't believe I'm saying this, our savior appears. And who else would it be but that dickhead David? Finally coming to do one other good thing in this entire game. By using the rewind, we can direct David to take down Jefferson. Then, in the chat that follows, we make sure to tell David that Jefferson killed Chloe, so that David can put another bullet into Jefferson, ending the villain for good. Finally, David does something useful, double tapping the main villain. However, Max is displeased with this outcome and the current state of the present. She braves the storm to find Warren at the local diner to use the photograph he has to dive into the past to keep Chloe, the irredeemable bitch that she is, alive. Max convinces Chloe to do something else to take down Jefferson. Max regains consciousness on the beach with Chloe, staring down the storm together, with the plan being to go to the lighthouse, the one place in town that will be safe. But Max loses consciousness again, and we the players are forced into a trippy dream sequence. This sequence goes on for what feels like forever, especially due to that super annoying stealth section at the end. Upon completion, you arrive at the lighthouse with Chloe and are presented with the final option. This right here infuriates me to no end. This is the absolute worst thing about this game. We, the players, have been through all of the game's ups and downs, the emotional roller coaster, getting emotionally attached to the characters, and the entire game boils down to this one final choice. And the nature of this choice is what pisses me off the most. Why? Because this one final choice completely invalidates the entire game and every choice we, the players, have made up to this point. Naturally, I chose both options to see how the outcomes were different, but that doesn't mean I liked either choice. Chloe has in her possession a photograph taken moments before she is murdered in the bathroom at school in the opening sequence. Max has a choice. Either Max can use her powers to go back to that moment and let fate play out as planned, having Chloe die as fate has ordained. Or Max can say, fuck everyone else, only Chloe matters, and let the storm wipe out the town and everyone in it. The problem with this choice is that it shits on the writer's work for the entire rest of the game, because both options invalidate the entirety of the game and its experience. Why? Because this choice alone either negates every choice that gets made, as by going back to before the murder, every choice that gets made never happens, because all the choices happen after the murder occurs, or none of the choices matter because everyone else in town dies. Did Max have feelings for Warren? Did you get emotionally attached to Kate and her suicide? What about Chloe's mom? Or Frank, the drug dealer, who is actually a pretty good guy? What about all the side characters who you may have gotten attached to or slightly invested in? What about saving Victoria, who, even though she's a bitch, doesn't necessarily deserve to be killed by Jefferson? What about David the Dickhead? Well, who cares? The writers certainly don't, as neither ending is satisfying. In my mind, the only correct and canon ending is forsaking Chloe. Chloe is an incompetent deadbeat, a bitch for all the wrong reasons, a druggie who is pissing her life away, and is completely irredeemable as a character and a person. The game is an exercise in keeping this bitch alive. She dies in Chapter 1, twice potentially in Chapter 2, again potentially in Chapter 3, and once more in Chapter 4. That is unavoidable. It is an exercise in futility, trying to keep this irredeemable bitch alive, and she is not worth sacrificing an entire town. The canon ending, to me, is forsaking Chloe, who was fated to die, to make sure everyone else lives. I am convinced that the people who picked the other ending became attached to Chloe due to Stockholm Syndrome, because us players are stuck with Chloe for about 80% of the whole game. And then they had the nerve to make a prequel game where we play as Chloe. That can of worms will be talked about, because I'm still mad over this ending. The whole game is a worse, dumbed down version of the movie The Butterfly Effect. That movie was at least interesting. Nearly every choice the main character made was poor in some aspect, but it was interesting because of the multiple points in time the character would travel to, how radically different the timelines were, and that the ending was a decent approach, seeing as how the movie revolved around the idea that the best thing to do was to try to give everyone 10 out of 10 lives, but could only ever succeed at giving a few of the people 10 out of 10s due to sacrificing other 10 out of 10. So, the main character splits the difference and gives everyone an 8.5 out of 10 life, where it could be better, but is tolerable and most everyone is happy. Not to mention, the movie also had some decent gratuitous nudity, which automatically makes it better than Life is Strange. Everything else is near 1-to-1. Character can jump through time using objects that hold memories. If character uses power, it causes nosebleeds, headaches, and blackouts. Character does the time jumps to save themselves and those they love, and character has to make an extremely difficult choice for themselves at the very end of the story. To conclude this part of the saga, it's also infuriating that last year a direct sequel to this Life of Strange game came out, and the creators of said game have the gall to say that both endings are canon to the story of the new game. How can it possibly be both? Pick a canon ending, you filthy cowards! It's bad enough that the ending choice invalidates the entire game. The least you could do is say which of the two is what actually happened. Many of my issues with the first game are compounded in the prequel game Before the Storm. The game is much shorter, focusing on the irredeemable bitch Chloe and her path towards becoming the irredeemable bitch that we see in the main game. Because the game is a prequel, the story has to be self contained. This means that no matter what we do, Rachel will end up dead, and most of what the player does in this game is free of consequences. And what is Chloe's power? If we look at the powers of the other protagonists in the games of this series, we have time travel, telekinesis, and telepathic empathy. What power does Chloe get? Well, she's a bitch. So naturally, her power is bitching. The game calls this power smack talk. This is accurate, as every time Chloe talks, I am filled with the overwhelming urge to smack the shit out of her. The game does a decent job showing that Rachel, despite having a nuclear family, has their own issues. Although, to be honest, because we the players spend so much time fixing and repairing the beater truck, I got more attached to the truck than I did to Rachel, let alone any other character. The only new important characters we really get to see are Rachel, Rachel's mother and father, Rachel's actual mother, and the new villain, Damon. The story revolves around the blossoming romance between Chloe and Rachel and the inherent dysfunction of Rachel's family, sprinkled with prior drama in the Price household. Throughout the game, we find out that Rachel's real mother is a drug addict, and now that the mother has gone through rehab, she wants to meet Rachel. At first, we think that Rachel's dad is having an affair. Then the bomb gets dropped about Rachel's biological mother. Of course, things can never be simple. Why? Because Rachel's father's cut a deal with the main villain Damon to either kill or run out of town Rachel's biological mother. So we spend the game trying to track down Rachel's mother, having multiple run-ins with the main villain Damon. Damon attacks Rachel in episode 2, putting her in the hospital. And then in episode 3, Damon manages to knock out Chloe after having drugged Rachel's biological mother. Frank ends up saving Chloe twice throughout the story and is implied to have killed Damon off screen, which is why Damon doesn't appear in the main game. The only choices that matter are whether or not we can convince Rachel's real mother to meet with Rachel. Beyond that, everything else feels very inconsequential. On the official, patented Dan the Ranking Man scale, these games get a low 34 out of 100. The Platinum is so easy, it's practically a participation trophy, not even worthy of putting on the scale. I think that's what bothers me most about these two games. It feels like, despite the entirety of the games revolving around the choices that we players make, none of the choices actually matter, in spite of what each chapter's disclaimer says. In the prequel, nothing major can happen because the major events are all set in stone. And in the main game, everything comes down to one final decision, made at the very end, and nothing else actually matters. I am reluctant to get invested as it feels like the games themselves and the writers don't actually respect your or my time or intelligence. I was at least pleasantly surprised at some of the twists in the main game, but that's about it. Overall, the experience leaves a bitter taste in my mouth, and I probably won't be as invested in the rest of the series. Later, I will be platinuming Life is Strange 2 and True Colors. Hopefully, those stories and choices are handled better than the first game and its prequel. So, until next time, and remember, only losers didn't kiss Warren at the diner at the end of the game.